The live-action adaptation of Snow White, directed by Mark Webb, features Rachel Ziegler in the titular role. As I was watching, I initially thought, maybe this isn't as bad as I expected. The first act, in particular, seemed to be doing exactly what a live-action remake should, capturing the spirit of the original while expanding on some aspects that the animated version rushed through. We get more insight into Snow White's parents, the rise of the evil queen, and Snow White's escape into the forest where she stumbles upon a magical land known as the Uncanny Valley. In this land, she encounters 7 characters who are supposed to pass as live-action versions of the dwarfs. The film starts to take its time, fleshing out details that add layers to the story, which feels like a step in the right direction. It's clear that the film is trying to offer more than what the animation could, and for a moment I was on board with it. However, when I look back at the film as a whole, I can't help but think that it's a movie of missed opportunities. Rachel Ziegler as Snow White was one of the better elements. Despite the media frenzy surrounding her press interviews and the infamous microphone incident that Disney probably regretted, Ziegler's portrayal of Snow White stands out. Her Snow White is more nuanced than just the innocent, naive girl we've seen before. She brings an emotional depth that isn't simply about being the object of everyone's affection. She's tasked with playing a character who is loved by both humans and animals, which, let's face it, is a tricky thing to pull off. It could have felt overly saccharine or unrealistic, but Ziegler made it believable. She also has a fantastic voice, which is crucial for a musical like this. The musical numbers are integral to the story, and Ziegler nails the vocal performances when the songs kick in. But does she truly carry the film? Well, that's debatable. Snow White, surrounded by her 7 dwarfs, and Dopey, who has some surprisingly sweet moments, doesn't face much competition in the acting department. But perhaps in the absence of much else, Ziegler shines by default. It's tough to measure her performance against a more substantial ensemble, but if we're honest, she does her best with what's given to her. As for Gal Gadot as the evil queen, the response was more mixed. The internet once hailed her as the ultimate superhero in Wonder Woman, but in Snow White, her portrayal felt more forced, almost as though she was trying to outcamp herself. It's like she took inspiration from Raul Julia's over-the-top villainous performance in Street Fighter, a performance that was so extreme it was hard not to enjoy it for its sheer audacity. Here it sometimes felt a little off. Gal Gadot's evil queen didn't quite hit the mark for many, though there was something enjoyable about her hammy performance, especially during the villain song. Disney villains are known for their big, dramatic musical numbers, and while it was clear that the intention was to make Gadot's performance memorable, it landed better during the actual song. Outside of that, her over-the-top performance seemed more like an attempt at camp than anything truly menacing, but maybe that's part of the fun. The music is another area that this adaptation struggles with. The Disney live-action remakes tend to fall into one of 2 categories when it comes to music. Either they stick to familiar, beloved songs that fans can reconnect with, or they introduce new, forgettable tunes. Unfortunately, Snow White leans toward the latter. The opening song immediately set the tone for what was to come, and I braced myself for a lackluster musical experience. But amidst the new music, there's a standout performance from Gadot's villainous number. Her campiness and over-the-top delivery added something to it, making it the one enjoyable part of the film's music. Ultimately, though, the rest of the score didn't live up to the magic we associate with Disney. If you're hoping to relive the charm of the original soundtrack, you might be disappointed. The soundtrack here just doesn't compare, and it leaves you wondering why they didn't lean into the classics a little more. One of the more bizarre aspects of the film comes when Snow White leaves the dwarfs behind to join a group of bandits. This shift in the storyline feels like a bizarre detour, almost like playing a video game and accidentally stumbling onto a DLC side quest that doesn't feel connected to the main story. You're no longer invested in the dwarfs. You're now hanging out with these generic bandits, and it feels like a completely different film. It's unclear why this shift happens. One of the bandits is even referenced by name, but it's hard to tell who they are or why we should be invested in them. It's as though the film tried to combine 2 very different versions of the story,